Aitsquayo. Ichaiwa, Aikwanisilanama. I was thinking of my grandmother this morning. That's normally how she would meet or greet me when I go and visit her. So I just thought I'd say Aitsquayo, good day. That's Hokkaiman language. We're going to get started on the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting today. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are doing our business in the traditional territory of the Comox peoples. And we'll just move into the next item on the agenda, delegations. No delegations. No delegations, apparently. Okay. Excellent. We'll move on to item number C. I'm very efficient this morning, I must say. Item C, we can get somebody to make a motion. Second. Thank you. On favor? Sorry. We got a finger waving already. Director Green.
Not so fast, Honorable Chair. Just a brief comment that we seem to be suffering from resolution status report creep. Once again, we've got a list of 5 pages long, over 300 items, some dating back to 2019, which is going to be 6 years ago pretty quick. And being that this is the last Electoral Area Services Committee for the year, I would like to, when we get to that point, maybe see if I can solicit some support in maybe cutting this list in half and letting some of the stuff go that we may never see to fruition, rather than just tagging it on and tagging it on and tagging it on. So we've been here before, right? And we have worked at limiting the size of the list somewhat. When you get to the point where if it ain't happening in 6 years' time, it's probably not going to happen. We don't have the staff capacity to have all these plates in the air anyway. So with that, I'll leave it open for discussion. I see my learned friend from Area A might chime in. Thank you.
Director.
Yeah, thanks. It has grown quite a bit, not to 300, but to 30 items. And I think before last term, we did a good job of winding it down. So I see that many of the items are actually dated as of 2023. The 2 that you referred to from 2019, that staff work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to identify opportunities to implement rainwater volume reduction best management practices within the road-of-way in select areas of the Saratoga Beach neighborhood. I'm not sure if we can get a status from staff on that. And the other, that engineering staff work with the planning department and development services branch to incorporate rainwater management language again for Saratoga Beach. So it looks like those 2 items from 2019 are both tied to Saratoga. The other ones, I did read them this weekend, and we do have 200 staff. And I think some of those resolutions are sitting in different departments as items to complete. So we could have an exercise at a future meeting to look at what we want to cut, but I didn't find a ton for myself that I wouldn't necessarily cut. So, but the 2019, I agree, it'd be good to get a status update because that's 4 years, 4 years in now.
If I can, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Rutten, our General Manager of Engineering Services, can provide an update on those 2 items with respect to the Saratoga area. And what I would just remind the directors of is when the board delegated authority to the Electoral Area Services Committee, several of these types of motions that you see at committee meetings now become the purview of the EASC as opposed to going to the board. And so the responsibility rests here. What we try to do with this resolutions report is just note when an item is coming forward, and then it'll be coming off of the report for the next meeting. So of the 30 items on here, I think there's probably at least about 8 that are coming off after today's meeting, and simply we've included it here to be transparent about the motions that were passed and the actions being taken, and then we'll update that. So we're always looking to keep this list as short as it can be, and reporting on the actions being taken. But Mark, if you had any updates on the Saratoga items.
Yeah, thanks through the CEO and through the chair. So these last 2 items on the report, they come from a rainwater management report that we brought forward at the time. And in the staff report, that covered that consultant's report, we included these recommendations. The findings from that report, you know, they really showed that we needed to work with Ministry of Transportation to use the road right away for a drainage purpose that had not been used in the past, and it's not currently accepted by them. And also that we needed to work with private property owners or a large development to implement on-lot rainwater solutions that were different than in the past. So, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to work with a large development. There is one planned for that area. And so if it does move forward, and we did update the comment section, the action comment section to allude to that. So we do want to work with a large development to implement some of these best practices, and our work with Modi is ongoing. But until we're ready to kind of present something to them and hope that they will commit to it, we won't be able to move forward. And then in addition to that, the report also recommended some downstream solutions in the wetland areas that we still need to address. So it's one of these projects that we don't have a rainwater function. We don't have a service to specifically work on these things. We are, we're just trying to do it as opportunities come up, and hopefully we can make some progress on it in the future if development happens.
Any follow-up? Director Green.
No, I totally get that. And I know that the big bugaboo is the province, and the fact that we don't have the same powers as municipalities, and we have to go hat in hand always to the provincial ministries. But there's what we're asking for is I guess is stuff that hasn't been considered, and we can't expect too much bravery at the political level of seeing other orders of government. So I mean, I just don't. I mean, I guess to give up would be to admit it's futile. But you could say a private property owner in that area is talking about a development that would absolutely need to address the rainwater problem. But then again, do we have the tools to do it? So you have to ask yourself, unless you're going to actually go down and talk to the ministry. And are we ever? Is this ever going to move off the mark? So, and some other things in there as well. But I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention that maybe we could limit the list a little bit and get real on the ones that we can actually see coming to our fruition during our own lifetime. Thank you,
Director Harper.
Yeah, thanks is it a possibility for staff to look at moving this one from an active thing to moving to a resolution for advocacy to the province? I know we have the VICC deadline in February, and it's not just Saratoga, it's everywhere that we're struggling with, especially with atmospheric rivers and the volumes of water everywhere. Maybe it's starting to push on the province to enhance the amount of monies they're allocated. They're already talking in that regard to look differently at roads, especially with all the major disasters we've experienced the last 10 years. So maybe that's something that could come off our book and then put it on the provincial plate.
Director Green.
So, Mr. Chair, remind me under new business to propose we craft a resolution to UBCM AVICC, because I'm sure it's not just us. Thank you.
Any more comments on the resolution status report? A vote on receipt of the resolution status report then? Have somebody? Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Moving to item D, reports. I see we have 3 reports to receive. Thank you. Anybody gonna speak on them or? No? Okay, we'll vote on receipt of the reports then. On favor? Carried. D2, Electoral Area C Development Variance Permit Application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ton True, Manager of Planning Services, will be introducing this staff report on the Clarkson Avenue Development Variance Permit. Ton, over to you.
Good morning. Thanks, James. Through the chair to through the CEO to the chair to the committee. In front of the committee is a development variance permit to allow the conversion of an existing accessory building to a carriage house by increasing the permitted non-residential floor area of the first story from 90 square meters to 105.08 square meters. This application did go to the Advisory Plan Commission C, which their commission supported their proposal. Staff also sent mail notes to adjacent neighbors, and as of today, we have not received any correspondence. Staff recommends that the variance be approved, as it will allow their owners to use the existing building to create a dwelling unit, and their proposal of the increase of floor area is minor in nature. Staff further recommends that the development variance permit only be executed once the owner has resolved the non-compliant status of the shed, the lean-to, and the cabin structure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Their applicant is here. Lee Connolly is in the gallery, and she's here to answer any of your questions.
Great. So does the applicant want to come forward and provide any comments or? Okay, great. So we also invite other folks to come out and provide comments. If there's anybody in the audience or via Zoom that would like to provide any comments with regards to the application, they're more than welcome to come forward now if they so desire. Okay. All right. Looks like there doesn't appear to be any other comments or concerns. So can we vote on receipt of the application? Oh, we have to dismiss the applicant from the table first. No, you can just head back to the audience there. Thanks. All right. Now can we vote? All right, vote on receipt. All in favor? Carried. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Edwin. Thank you. So vote on receive correspondence for the application. All in favor? Okay. And there's recommendations. Carried. So, oh, sorry, Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just in regards to this vote, definitely in favor. I think it's good when people add housing in the rural areas on properties, and this is a good way to do it. I think to convert an existing building into something that can be lived in. So very supportive. Thanks.
So voting on the recommendation then, in regards to the application, all in favor? Carried. Item number 3.
Second.
Thank you.
And again, over to Ton True again for this report.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Here is another development variance permit application. Their applicant is proposing to reduce the rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3.35 meters for the foundation of an existing building, to reduce the rear yard eave setbacks from 5.5 meters to 2.89 meters, and reduce the side yard setback from 3.5 meters to 1.07 meters for the foundation of the existing building, and also to reduce the side yard eve setback from 1.75 meters to 0.77 meters in order to permit the conversion of a one-story accessory building to a carriage house. Notification letters were sent out to adjacent neighbors, and staff did receive one correspondence in support of their proposal. Staff recommends that the variance be approved. The proposal setbacks will still allow the privacy between the neighbors, adjacent neighbor properties, as there are no windows proposed on the side of the building subject to the variance. There are existing mature landscaping features at the rear to increase privacy. Staff is in support of the application because it will enable the creation of an additional dwelling unit by using the existing building. Their applicant is here today, Mr. Chair, and his name is Gavin Waterfield.
Invite the applicant to come up there and provide some comments.
Hi, I just wanted to let you guys know I'm available to answer any questions or concerns, and yeah, please bring them forward to me if you do have concerns. Thank you.
Director
Thanks.
Harper?
I guess, yeah, it's good to see you again. Just been a few months. I thought the building might be done by then, but I guess you encountered that that little thing that needs a little bit of variance. So I see that the neighbors are in support. So that's good to see, and yeah, I have no issues with issuing the variance. Thanks.
Director Green?
Yeah, I think we need to look no further than the tents down the street here to know that we do have an issue with housing. So anything that helps gets my vote.
Thanks very much for coming up. And we'll open the podium or microphone up to anyone in the audience that might want to come up and provide any comments or concerns. Or open it up via Zoom as well. Not seeing anybody rushing to the podium or the microphone. We'll vote on receipt of the report. All in favor? Carried.
Received all the correspondence. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Oh, sorry. All in favor? Carried.
The recommendation. Second.
All in favor? Carried. Vote on recommendations? Oh. Sorry. It's Monday morning. So vote on recommendations and we're good? Oh, and we did that.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Chow, our planner 2, long range, will be introducing the staff report on the Clarkson Avenue development permit. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, CEO, to the chair and the committee. The subject property is located at 8914 Clarkson Avenue, and it's approximately 0.38 hectares in size. It currently features a tourist accommodation, being 3 cabin units in 2 buildings, and a RV park with 7 sites and a residential dwelling. These uses are permitted in Tourist Commercial 1 zone. On June 27th of this year, the CVRD board approved a commercial and industrial farming character development permit, as well as a site-specific prescribed floodplain setback for additions to the dwelling, which includes an attached garage, decks, and patios. Subsequent to the approval, the applicant later revised the project, changing from the attached 1-story garage to a 2-story detached garage with upper-level storage. This change, making the garage a non-habitable building, eliminates the need for a site-specific prescribed floodplain setback under the floodplain bylaw. The revised detached garage, along with additions, continue to comply with the development permit area guidelines on building form, character, landscaping, and rainwater management. Therefore, CVRD staff recommends the issuance of development permit pending receipt of a landscape deposit. Last Thursdays ago, November 23rd, the area CAPC endorsed the amendment, noting the changes are minimal to the form and character and still maintaining the guidelines. The applicant, Carla Herman, is in attendance to answer any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
So did you have any comments in regards to the application itself or? Thanks. Any comments or questions from directors in regards to the application? Director Green?
So I take it we lose the sea cans. Good, thank you.
Great, thanks. It doesn't look like we have any more questions for you, so thanks for coming forward. So we're still vote on receipt of the report. All in favor? Carry.
Move recommendation. Second.
Great. So we have a recommendation that the Comox Valley Regional District approve an amendment to the commercial industrial development permit for proposed additions to an existing residential dwelling and a detached accessory building on property described as Lot B, District Lot 221, Comox District Plan 29129, PID 001 425 170 on 8914 Clarkson Avenue. And finally, that upon the receipt of the landscape security deposit of 5887.50, the corporate legislative officer be authorized to execute the permit. Vote on recommendation. On favor? Carried.
Group 5. Second.
Great. And Brian Chow again is here to introduce the staff report. Item 5 on a floodplain setback on Island Highway South. Brian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CEO, to the chair and committee. The subject property is approximately 2.24 hectares and is zone country residential 1. The address is 6448 Island Highway South in Electoral Area A. Currently, the property has 2 single detached dwellings and an accessory building which serves as a garage. The subject property is located within the coastal floodplain as mapped in the Comox Valley Regional District's Coastal Flood Adaptation Strategy. Currently, the applicant seeks to add an accessory building envisioned as a 1-story art studio. The approximate size is 64 square meters and includes a deck. The applicant preferred to locate this studio building at 15 meters from the sea's present natural boundary. A notable feature of this building is the inclusion of a hot water tank, which under the floodplain management bylaw classified this space as habitable. So therefore, the applicant is submitting a floodplain application. In the floodplain report, the engineers prescribe a 2100-year flood construction level at 5 meters geodetic, which is consistent with the CVRD coastal flood mapping project. For the 2100-year floodplain setback, they identify a buildable area towards the Island Highway, which is figure 10 in the staff report, which would meet the future floodplain setback as well as the minimum lot line setbacks of the zoning bylaw. When this information was conveyed to the applicant submitted a revised engineering report in which the report indicated that if this building were to be sited within the buildable area, it would require tree removal, impact ground stability, and groundwater. The engineers state that the preferred location at 50 meters from the present natural boundary would pose similar geotechnical risks. The engineers provide mitigation strategies that would make the land safe for the intended use, being an art studio. The applicant prefers the 15-meter location due to fewer environmental impacts, archaeological sensitivity, and the presence of existing infrastructure, which the applicant submitted in their written briefs in appendices B and C. From the staff's perspective, under the provincial flood hazard area land use management guidelines, reducing floodplain setback is only considered if there are serious physical constraints. This is crucial for maintaining natural flood defenses, ensuring safety, and fostering community resilience. Since there is a buildable area elsewhere on the property, staff does not support the 15-meter site-specific floodplain setback request. The applicant is on Zoom, Russ Hepworth-White, as well as the agent, John Gower, is in the audience, and they're able to answer any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
To the chair, directors and staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this project. I'm here to answer questions, but before I do that, I would just like to reiterate 4 main points in our argument for putting the building in our preferred location. And first of all, I would like to remind everybody that this is a private art studio that we're talking about. It is not a dwelling. It is not a business. It is something that is going to be occupied only occasionally. And as such, the risk to human life from an adverse weather event is considered to be minimal. Also, because it's an art studio, having a view of the water and having natural light is important. I realize that is not considered as an argument, but that is a big part of the rationale for picking the site. The approved location, on the other hand, is mostly cut off from the view and is close to the highway and in the midst of dense forest. The second main point is that the property is believed to be a formerly active First Nation site. And as you walk through the property, you see everywhere evidence of middens. We have an archaeological permit for work that's ongoing there at the present time. The area where we propose to put the building has already been cleared, and there would be no further disturbance planned for that area. Whereas if you go away from that and further away from the water, we come into an area where there's quite a bit of topographic variability. And in order to put the building in there, we'd have to be excavating, and the archaeological impacts would be much greater. So we think that that is a significant reason for preferring the other site. The third point is that the geotechnical engineer on the project, through an iterative process with Brian over many different versions of the report, is comfortable with the proposed location, believes that it is safe for the intended use, with the proper mitigative measures of protecting the soil around it from erosion and from having the proper flood construction level. So this is the language that it was asked for by staff, and we presume that it would give a high degree of comfort with the proposal. And the final point is that if it is approved in its preferred location, closer to the water, the clients will be bound by the conditions of a covenant that absolves the regional district of liability in the event of flooding and denies the Hebblethwaites access to disaster financial assistance should any adverse event happen. So in summary, we'd just like to say that Russ and Terry Hebblethwaite want to enjoy the property, develop it in a low-key and respectful manner with minimal impact to the existing values, take full responsibility for their decisions, and create no further liabilities or obligations for local government. And I hope that you will recognize the strengths of their argument and approve option 2, which is to approve the application with a restrictive covenant. Thank you.
I see Russ is online. Did you want to provide any other comments there, Russ, or are you good with your representative here?
Yes, if I may, and good morning and thank you, Mr. Chair. And
you're on mute, my friend.
I'm sorry, just a second. Hello. it shows no mute.
Sorry, Ross, we're having some tech problems here, so.
Oh.
It might be his
Okay.
microphone selection.
Well,
Your microphone selection is what's being suggested on our end. We can't hear you.
okay, just a second.
No.
Second, disconnect audio.
I see Director Grieve has a comment, Russ, while we're trying to get your
Hello.
audio up and running. Maybe we'll get Director Grieve to put forward a comment.
Okay.
Director Grieve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This looks to me like a building in New Orleans. My question, I guess, is through a bit more on the technical side. The apparatus that you wind down into the substrate, are they a commercially available product, or are you having those designed and built?
They're commercially available, and they've actually used them already on the adjacent house to do an addition on the house.
Oh, okay. Very good. Better than hammering in a telephone pole.
Yep.
The same kind of idea. Well, if I may, being a bit of a failed rock star myself and having my own studio, I totally get it. Location. You want the light. You want the sight lines. You want the sounds and the sights of the natural order. I mean, it all makes perfect sense to me. It is not a dwelling. It's a studio. So if the RD is worried about liability and we have an agreement for a covenant and it's just a shed roof, how many square feet is it? About 500?
I believe it's around 64 square meters, 660 square feet, something like that.
570. 570.
You got to talk in old man speech to me. I don't know. Square meters, it's like that.
688 square feet.
Perfect. Okay, so I have no objection to recommendation 2. I think you should build it, and it'll be a great space to create. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chair.
Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to staff this, was there consideration to refer this to the area APC for discussion?
Through the CEO to the chair to Director Arbor, it has not been our practice to refer technical reports or applications such as this to the advisory planning commissions due to the technical nature, as we rely on the professional engineers' comments, recommendations relative to our legislative requirements, in this case, the Local Government Act, Section 524, I believe, 7, that's related to floodplain as well as the provincial guidelines. So in short, we have not or never sent any floodplain applications to any APCs in the past.
Thanks for clarifying, which I find a little bit disappointing, because I think this is exactly the kind of case that would be good to bring to the APC, where you're dealing with floodplain, you're dealing with a little unit. And I want to first acknowledge the letter that the applicant sent along in the package, and the efforts that were made, and already investments in the direction towards that. So I want to say the fact that the directional drilling to avoid archaeological impact and all that, I just want to say that was noted. But in the bigger picture, I guess my concern is not probably with the current owner, but potential future owners and uses. I noticed that in my area, in Hornby or other places, this is exactly the type of building that can turn into a housing unit, a smaller housing unit, or a vacation rental or something like that. So when we make it, this is why I'd love the APC to weigh in on these types of files, because I think long-term, it's fine to say we're building an art studio, but I think the reality in rural areas is a lot of these buildings do turn into housing over time. And so that impacts, that would make the staff argument more valid, I think, because otherwise I do agree with Dr. Grieve that it was a guarantee that this stays as an art studio forever and forever. The degree of concern was not be as high. So I'm struggling with it. So he's saying I can't. We have a lot of feedback here.
Russ,
Yeah.
if we can get you to turn your speaker off on your computer.
Hello.
Oh, hi, we can hear you now.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Okay,
I phoned in on
pause
my phone and I'm getting
pass.
double feedback. I apologize.
Yeah, so maybe now that he's available, maybe I'll pass it back to the chair and we can hear from the applicant. James.
Russ, you had a couple comments.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for that. I didn't realize apparently I turned up to be on there double, so my apologies. Yes, the only thing I would like to add is that the opening, the preferred area that we would like to place it in was an opening. There was one tree that we took down. That's all that had to be done. The other is completely mature forest on a very mature property. And as John said, a lot of indigenous middens open and exposed, and you can see we've taken the time and the expense to put underground services in, so we didn't have to disrupt these with open trench installation of utilities. And the one last thing that I would like to point out, and I've talked a lot with Brian, and I appreciate Brian and Tom's time spent with us. And Brian sent me a section 1.3 of the hazard area land use guidelines, and I'd just like to address paragraph 3, if I may. It says that setback requirements should not be reduced unless a serious hardship exists and no other reasonable option is available. And underlined, Brian has put, a valid hardship should only be recognized where the physical characteristics of the lot, e.g. exposed bedrock, steep slope, the presence of water course, etc., and size of the lot are such that the building development proposals consistent with land use zoning bylaws cannot occur unless the requirements are reduced. I would ask that you please consider the destruction of mature forest and the disruption of the potential disruption of First Nation middens in that as a consideration for a valid hardship. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yes, through the chair to Director Arbor, I just want to comment that in terms of the potential or what if, say, a future owner turns that proposed building into a dwelling. Firstly, the applicant or the subject property already has 2 dwelling units, so they have already maximized the number of density that's permitted on the property. So it would be under enforcement. Second factor is that should the board decided to go for option 2, the covenant, which will include the geotechnical report that's mentioned or that's only shape the building to be an art studio only. Thirdly, under building permits process, it will be limited to an accessory building only. So these are ways to control or help shape the use of the building. And of course, should anyone in the future not honor those 3 ways to control the use of the building, those will be under enforcement, no matter who that will be turned into a dwelling unit, Mr. Chair.
Director Arbor, you had some follow-up?
Yeah, thanks. I think we're all aware at this table that there's a difference between the theory of our bylaws and the reality on the ground. And I can assure you that we have an item later on the agenda that will be a big topic in regards to both short-term vacation rental and what are currently a number of illegal suites that are camouflaged as other buildings. I'm not saying again that this is the case here. I'm just saying that there's a reality in rural areas that we can't fool ourselves around. And we should wrestle with at some point. But this is why, for me, again, so if there is an opportunity here, Dr. Grieve is willing to approve the site. For many reasons, including what the applicant just said around clearing further forest. Like, I'm kind of in favor of it, but it feels like that is why we have other residents that understand the reality and could have a set of eyes on and a discussion on it. So am I hearing correctly that it's not an option today to refer this to the APC, or could we actually do that?
John?
Through the chair to Director Arbor, if this committee recommends that we send this back to the Advisory Plan Commission, or send this to the Advisory Commission for their advisory comments, we can. Just as Brian mentioned, we haven't done this in the past because of the geotechnical report, which is very technical. As staff, we wrap our heads around the report, and when we have numerous discussions with that professional to understand their rationale, putting this type of responsibility to the Advisory Planning Commission members, might be a lot. We can try it, and then maybe we can have a further discussion on what a staff's looking for a geotechnical report, because there is a lot of technical things in there that most members wouldn't understand.
Yeah, I understand that. I also hear from the member of my SPC that they feel quite underutilized in regards to the lightness of the task that they're faced with, and basically minor deck variances when we have huge issues on our deck. And I think as electoral directors, we don't have the benefit of having a full council in the area, and it's good. And when you say responsibility, I don't think there's any responsibility on EPCs because they're purely advisory. They don't bear decision power. It's just that we get more advice, and I think I wouldn't underestimate that some of these people also have technical and professional backgrounds that allow them to provide valuable input on issues such as this. So I know it's one more step. I would be not super comfortable with proceeding even though I'm leaning on proceeding, but with this one, but I would feel a lot better to run this through the APC because it touches on so many issues that we keep struggling with, floodplain exemptions, suites, and I mean this has all the ingredients of all the big topics we're wrestling with in the area. So I would like to refer it to the APC. Thanks.
So we're on receive report. All in favor of receive report? Carried. Now we have a recommendation here as well. So we'll go Director Green first.
Thank you very much. I tend to agree with my colleague from Area A that I think that it wouldn't hurt to have the APC's eyes on this. After all, they are just an advisory. I think for me, the fact that it is on pylons, the fact that it isn't taking down the trees, the fact that it's exposed to the natural order and elements, which makes it suitable to be a studio because it's a creative space. But that being said, I would move that we refer this to Area A's APC. If it pleases Your Honor, perhaps because of the fact we should be expediting this as much as possible, is there any way we can get it on this month's agenda?
Director Arbor.
I'll let staff answer first.
I look to Brian and Tom with respect to that timing for the next APC meeting. We can certainly include this on the next APC agenda whenever that happens to be, and then be able to return it to the EASC at the next opportunity.
Director?
Yeah, no, I just want double confirmation on that. Like, I think we have one in December, like we have one coming up really quickly here. So is it possible to include it on there? Realizing that we already have a full package that's basically ready. No comments from staff. Yeah, and to the applicant, I'm sorry. I mean, there's a part of me that was thinking of letting it go, but I think because it touches on bigger issues, I know it's going to create a month or two of delay, but I'd rather get this right and have some public input into it and then get it back at this table.
Tom?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I was told that the next Area A APC is on December the 11th. We, as staff, we did cancel that meeting, but we can reach out to the members again to see if they're still available. And if they are available, we can send this to their areas, AAPC.
That would be awesome because then it would really minimize the potential delay and provide the ASC with some input.
So vote on recommendation then in regards to deferral. On favor of deferring to the next Area A APC meeting on December 11th. Referral, sorry. Referral. On favor? Carried.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Russ. We're asking for a little bit of a timeout here, so we'll take about 5 minutes. Thanks. All right, come back from recess there. We're on item number 6, and I think we've voted on receipt of the report. We just brought it forward. Okay, so can we vote on receipt of report, please? In favor? Carry.
And Mr. Chair, Jody McLean, our senior planner, is able to introduce the staff report on the non-adhering residential use in the ALR. So Jody, over to you.
Thank you. To the CEO, to the chair, to the directors. The owner of a 73-hectare farm at the end of Kellen Road is leasing the property to a farm corporation that specializes in raspberries. Raspberries are a labor-intensive crop, and so the operator has applied to participate in the federal government's temporary foreign worker program. The agricultural stream of this program requires the employer to provide adequate and suitable housing constructed and available to the employees upon their arrival. Proposals for farm worker housing in the ALR are reviewed by the Agricultural Land Commission, and they need to see that the size and type of farm is consistent with the level of housing being proposed, and that the placement of the structures minimizes the impact on agricultural land. The Agricultural Land Commission has an expedited process for this type of application when certain conditions are being met, and the applicant has tailored the application to meet those conditions. However, first, the Agricultural Land Commission wants to hear any comments and recommendations from the local government. The Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission has reviewed this application and supports it as presented. Mr. Chair, staff has reviewed the proposal relative to the policies of the official community plan and also recommends it be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission with a support recommendation. The applicants, Cam Watt and Preston Ferris, are in the gallery here and can further provide more details.
Did the applicants want to come forward and provide some comments?
Good morning, Chair, area directors, staff. Thank you for having us. My name is Cameron Watt. I'm the agent for both the landowner and as well the farm corporation that leases the land for the growing of raspberries. And my name is Cameron Watt. This is Preston Ferris. And we're certainly happy to answer any questions with respect to the application.
Thank you. Any questions from directors? Director Arbor?
No questions. I think this looks good to me. Agree with staff in forwarding to the ELC, and I love the look of the property, including the pond and the water availability. It hits all the marks in terms of what we're hoping is going to happen in Comox Valley around farming, increased production, sustainability. So it ticks all the boxes for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions, I guess. Looking to house 130 workers. That and the buildings, 10 buildings of about 134 square meters. So are these modular buildings that are being brought in?
Preston?
Just leave it there, yeah, to come up.
The plan is to construct the units on site, just to save some transportation costs, instead of having them built offsite and transported in. So they'd be built on site, but essentially modular units, correct?
So are they subject to the same building restrictions that everybody else is as well?
Correct.
R40 in the ceiling and?
Correct, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm torn on this one because as I've made a point of lately, bringing attention to the fact we have people living in tents right here on this street. You can look out the window and see them in the atmospheric river. And yet we're supplying buildings for people who are not citizens of Canada to come here And they pay what, $35 or something a month for the building, is that correct?
$35 per week is
Per
what's
week.
allowed. Yes, correct.
$35 per week, and they get minimum wage.
Minimum wage plus performance bonus.
Well, I would think that there'd be some of our in-house people would just jump at that opportunity. But we don't have that ability to offer anything like that under our current OCP or zoning or anything. So, you know, I gave this one the raspberries. It seems grossly unfair. I mean, I'm not anti-immigration anyway, and I'm not anti having people come here and do farm work. And I do realize from talking to my farmer friends, it is a challenge to get farm labor because people don't want to work that hard. And if they're lucky, I mean, you know, going back to the old days in Comox Valley, just about everybody my age in high school went out and helped people in the farms do haying and whatever. So it was normal. But, you know, I realize the challenges nowadays that you get people, you know, you can only pick raspberries at half speed if you got the other hand on the iPhone. You know, you can only pick so many raspberries. But yeah, I just think that this whole concept, and I know it's sponsored by the feds, so it's a different kettle of fish. But yeah, I think I feel that this is something that should be available to a lot of our own citizens that are falling on hard times out there. I mean, would they thrive with a 134 square meter place to live for $35 a week and a place to work? Would it help them break their cycle of despair? So I, on a matter of principle, I'm not supporting it. Thank you.
Before I go to you, Preston, Director Arbor, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, thanks. And I would hope that Dr. Grieve keeps an open mind on this, and I'll say why. I think tying those, I mean, with everything you said, I pretty much agree with in regards to the homelessness and the housing crisis that we're facing and having different standards. But I would not tie those two issues together. We know that for an operation like this, it's temporary foreign workers, or maybe it'll be people in the valley as well that may end up working there. It's an investment for them that allow to put land under production. And I mean, we've talked probably for yourself, Dr. Reed, for 15 years, myself for the last 5 years, about how to help the farming sector increase production. And this is a way. This is a crop that requires a lot of hands in a short window of time. And we struggle with accommodating. We've heard that from farmers all over the valley, that accommodation factor is difficult. I hear you that you know, the regulations for those types of buildings seems to be lesser or something like that. But I would say let's work on the housing formlessness and the rest of it to have appropriate regulations and maybe lower ones for buildings, like we see other municipalities that are pushing the envelope on that. But I wouldn't tie those two issues together. I think this one is again, to me, it ticks a lot of boxes of what we're seeing emerging in our agricultural plan and our intent around supporting farming in the community.
Edwin, before we go to you, Preston.
Thank you. And just on Director Grieve's point, before we're allowed to bring in temporary foreign workers from another country, all of these jobs have to be posted on both the BC Job Bank as well as in other local publications as part of being granted the LMIA on behalf of Service Canada. So all of these jobs and the housing is made available to Canadian citizens first. Anybody that's willing to apply for that job. If we don't receive any applicants at that point, we're allowed to bring in temporary foreign workers from outside of the country. So just wanted to add a little bit of context there.
Thanks, Preston. Director Grieve.
Yeah, so we have 10 buildings and a potential of 130 workers. And Unless these are ever-bearing raspberries, my experience is raspberry season only lasts 3 or 4 weeks anyway. So is this all for a 3 or 4 week window?
Preston, then Director Arbor.
We actually employ a couple of different, really modern farming techniques that allow us to extend our raspberry season. So our typical season starts around the last week of June, first week of July, harvest starts, and we harvest all the way through the middle of October. So it's about 3.5 months that we're able to extend our season using some new farming and agronomy techniques.
So just to be clear, at the end of that season, you probably start letting people go, say in September, as it starts to wind down. And then for the rest of the year, is the plan to keep those units vacant?
Yeah, that is our current plan would be to keep those units vacant, and that's mostly under the directive of the Agricultural Land Commission in order for them to grant the zoning permission to build these units. They can only be used for the housing of agricultural workers. We'd be more than happy to explore other opportunities with the regional district here, but as far as we know, under the directive of the ALC, that's what we're allowed to do.
Director Arbor.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was heading with Dr. Greaves' question. Under the ag rules, are those temporary workers able to work on other farms? So for example, if there was work between the month of May and into July, would you be allowed to use those accommodations for nearby farms that may also have the use?
Preston.
Yes and no. So we would be able to sublease those units potentially to another farmer for their own use, but we could not use our own employees on another farm.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So we're getting a bit of education today. I have no further comments. I'll be in support of this. Thanks.
We do have the agent over there.
Chair, thank you very much. And through to Director Grieve. I think the other thing to remember is that these buildings have to meet BC building code. So they involve a structural engineer, they involve all of the code requirements of the BC building code. And so there are, and to always show our commitment to the local area, we hire only professionals from this area.
Director Green.
Well, I know we can't change the world, but I do think that a lot of these policies were rational back pre-COVID, back before when we were an entitled first world country. And from what I see, they're basically hamstringing a lot of possible opportunities for housing, number one. You know, and I do get it. I do realize that, you know, and it's very rare you can find someone that does farm work that can actually handle a load, because I hear it all the time. But I'm going to go at it from a different angle. Does this give an opportunity for the workers that come here to get fast tracked for immigration if they want to? Because I understand there is a possibility to move from temporary worker into either not a permanent resident, but eventually to a permanent residency. Is that true?
Preston.
Yeah, I'm not an immigration expert, but it is our understanding that you know, the first step of an immigrant trying to apply for permanent residency is showing that they have you know, work here in Canada and they're creating a life. We are currently talking to a couple of our employees that are potentially interested in that as a long-term opportunity, and we would love to support any of our employees that wanted to become permanent residents and move into a more permanent status here in Canada. That would be ideal for us.
I guess the thing that really sticks in my craw here is the fact that that building is going to sit there vacant when there's so much need out there. I know that's above our pay scale. We're just the smallest, lowest order of government, no height. So, you know, it makes absolutely no sense. The rationale doesn't pan out anymore, considering that we're living in much different times. As I say, just stick your head out the window and take a look.
Mr. Chair, all I would add is that this is an application to the Electoral Area Services Committee for that agricultural reserve non-adhering residential use. And I can appreciate there are a lot of other factors and concerns being raised. For the Electoral Area Services Committee, the recommendation that staff is putting forward is to support that non-adhering use. And I think, yeah, the comments do demonstrate that there's a lot of other competing interests and competing factors, but they would be best addressed in other formats by way of either advocacy to senior other levels, more provincial and federal government orders of government or other regulatory agencies. For the Electoral Area Services Committee, it's a fairly narrow recommendation at this point in this application.
Thank you, James. And I was going to provide those comments as well. So I understand the concerns that you're putting forward, Director Grieve. They're fair comments. But I also feel at the end of the day, if we're focusing on the report itself and voting on the report shortly here, I do think that there's now need for some advocacy work there as well, moving forward, to see what we can do about trying to address some of those comments and concerns that you put forward. It sounds like the applicant was willing to work with the CBRD on trying to address those issues down the road. But first things first, we need to get the infrastructure in place. Thanks. Director B, if you have one more comment, and then we'll vote on receipt of report. Thanks.
Sure, thanks for the leeway. I guess we can just add it to our resolution status report.
There you go.
But seriously, folks, it's important to get on top of the table and jump up and down once in a while. These are very serious times. It's not status quo anymore. We're living in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grieve. Now coming back to receive and vote on receipt of report. All in favor of receipt of the report? Carried. Now we also have a recommendation as well. So, oh, sorry. We'll excuse the applicants before moving into receiving recommendation. Thanks. So vote on receive of recommendation. All in favor? Oh. Sorry. I thought we had vote on recommendation.
You voted on the receipt of it. You just
Okay. Sorry. All right. Sorry. So we need to vote on receipt of the report.
You've done that.
We've done that.
You've done that. So you just need somebody to move and second the recommendation.
Okay.
If they want to.
So motion to receive recommendation.
Move the recommendation. The director move the recommendation. Is there a second?
Yeah, I second.
So it's all in favor.
So now we're on vote.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
Any further discussion on the recommendation? Not seeing any. Now we'll vote on the recommendation. All in favor? Any opposed? Moving to item number 7.
Receive short-term rental accommodations.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, Alana Malali, our General Manager of Planning and Development Services, will be introducing the staff report on Provincial Bill 35. So Alana, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, James. Through Mr. Chair to the directors. As you know, back in April, the province reduced its Homes for People plan, and the overarching purpose of that plan is to provide greater housing supply across the province. To implement the plan, the province has introduced 4 bills as well as some miscellaneous amendments. And together, these four bills could have the impact to could have the effect of it significantly changing the local level housing landscape in a positive direction. And certainly that's been a bit of a theme already this morning around our needs to provide housing for residents. So Bill 35 is the subject of this first report, and then I'll speak about the other bills during the second report. Bill 35 is the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, and it is intended to support communities who are trying to get a handle on or regulate the short-term rental market. And for some communities, certainly the short-term rental market has had a significant impact on their secondary rental market. So Bill 35 applies to the Comox Valley Regional District's electoral areas insofar as all hosts of these short-term rental units will need to make an application to the province to register their offering on the soon-to-be built provincial registry. And then they'll need to comply with terms and conditions set out as part of their provincial registration. So Bill 35 is enabling legislation. So right off the hopper, just know that at this point in time, the CVRD is not required to change anything in the electoral areas. And this is due to the framework that's already in place in our electoral areas through our zoning bylaw, as well as some specific exemptions that are built into the bill. So I'll speak a little bit about what can happen now in the electoral areas for short-term rental accommodations. So outside of the agricultural land reserve, accommodations for the traveling public are permitted in specific formats and in specific zones. So the first is tourist accommodation units in some commercial zones. And the second is in our residential zones, some residential zones, as a bed and breakfast under the guise of a home occupation. Bill 35 does not apply to hotels, motels, lodges, that sort of thing, but it does apply certainly to the bed and breakfast that is housed within our zoning bylaw. We define a bed and breakfast as a home occupation use that provides bedrooms within a principal dwelling and the first meal of the day for the traveling public. And it's for stays less than 30 days. So right now, prospective short-term accommodation hosts in the electoral areas can either operate within the framework of that bed and breakfast use, or they can make a site-specific application for an alternative form. So for example, a zoning amendment or a temporary use permit. An example would be someone who wants to use a carriage house for a short-term rental accommodation unit. That would need a site-specific approval. And the reason is because it's not within the principal dwelling, which is what the bed and breakfast use says it needs to be. So in considering in considering a site-specific application for a short-term accommodation use, you might look to factors such as the findings of the most recent housing needs report, current vacancy rent rates within our rental market, location of the use. So for example, is the proposed rental in the principal dwelling? Is it in the carriage house, etc.? You might consider the community context. So whether we have tourist accommodation needs that are being unmet in other parts of the accommodation market. You might consider servicing to the property as well as some other property attributes. Key components of Bill 35. I'm just going to walk through 4 of them here. So as I said, I referenced registration. Beginning in May of 2024, short-term rental offers will need to be registered with the province, and they'll be registered by the supplier who offers the rental. Suppliers will have to show a valid business license where applicable. They'll have to show their provincial registration number and any provincially prescribed information about their rental, and they'll have to make that available to the public. The second big or second highlight I'd like to flag for you is a principal residence requirement. A principal residence is defined in this bill as the place, the residence where the person lives more than any other place. The principal residence requirement right off the hopper does not apply in the electoral areas, but it does apply in Cumberland, Comox, and in Courtenay. Our electoral areas are in an exempt lands category. And then local governments, I'll talk about this in a moment, but local governments that have jurisdiction over exempt lands will be able to request to opt in to some of the provisions of the bill, including this principal residence requirement. The The third change is business regulation. As you know, prior to this bill, regional districts do not have business licensing authority. This bill proposes to change that. So by extending that business regulation authority to regional districts, including that ability to enter into the intermunicipal business scheme, which we have here in place among our municipalities. We could also develop a separate business regulatory scheme if that's of interest to you. So this enabling authority is not restricted to short-term rental accommodation. Rather, you could use it to regulate other types of businesses. We expect more information on this as well as the entirety of the bill and its implementing regulations in January. And so we'll come back to you certainly with more information as we learn more. But in the meantime, some things you might consider about using this tool relative to short-term rental accommodations may include the relative ease of enforcement. So bylaw licensing, or pardon me, business licensing versus our land use enforcement avenues through the BC Supreme Court. You might also consider the ability to track the impact of short-term rental accommodation on housing supply. So I would suggest, for example, that whether or not someone pulls a business license is likely a better indicator of whether they're actually running a short-term accommodation unit than if we're just looking at their enabling zoning. The fourth change I'd like to just flag is that Bill 35 puts the primary onus on suppliers to comply with this provincial statute and on the province to enforce its terms. The province will be establishing a compliance unit that will have the authority to track the listings, collect data on the use, and then in turn share that data with us, issue compliance orders, and administer penalties for violations. So as I noted, this report is just provided to you for information at this time. And unless we're otherwise directed, we will report back when any new applicable information becomes available or when the bill receives assent, which is expected in January. I do want to flag that because the registration requirement applies in May 2024, prospective short-term accommodation suppliers in the electoral areas that are seeking a site-specific land use approval to operate a short-term accommodation may need to make an application to either amend their zoning or to make an application for a temporary use permit. So these would be folks who have been operating outside of the frame of our current zoning bylaw, those folks who are running something other than the bed and breakfast. And I would just flag, because of this tight timeline, we will do our best as staff to get those in front of you to meet the deadlines and the tight position that people will find themselves in, but we won't be able to guarantee that, as I'm sure you can appreciate with those 30 items on that resolutions list. I think that's all that I wanted to flag for now. Just to reiterate, more information will be coming later this month and into January, and we'll come back to you to talk about what your interest might be around some of these options. Today is just intended for you to start to get a bit of a conversation started about how you may wish to proceed. Thank you, Chair.
Director.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for this succinct report on this new policy from the province, which, yeah, it's good to see the province get more involved. I would note that there's a part of the policy that I think seems very new in the sense of tracking short-term rentals at the province. All short-term rentals for the last 4 or 5 years have had to register for PST. So in theory, the province would already have a pretty healthy data set outside of business licenses otherwise, or that new registry to actually know the reality on the ground. Of course, probably quite a few short-term rentals that are underground may not have charged PST. So in my area, it's complicated because obviously we have the Islands Trust and Denman Island mirrors the Bainstown portion in the sense that only bed and breakfasts are allowed. On Hornby, since 2008, short-term rentals have been allowed pretty much on all lots. So we have between 150 or 200 of them. The Islands Trust will not have capacity or I think even legislative authority to implement business licenses. So I think that service would have to come through the regional district, which would require collaboration between us and the islands to look at the potential licensing. And I'm already in touch people on Hornby that are asking if the regional district will step into that space for the islands. So I know that adds another layer to our consideration, but that's a pretty significant one. There's already a lot of short-term rentals in the electoral areas. And so many of them would not be compliant with our bylaws. My experience on Hornby when temporary use permit were brought forward a number of years ago as a potential way to get people out of the shadows, it did not work. So because of that, I think I will lean in January, depending on what you bring back, on us starting to look at a regulated framework for vacation rental. That might link well to our OCP effort that we might lead into the next couple of years. I'm someone who sees glass half full, glass half empty with vacation rental. I think it provides a worthy livelihood for many residents. In rural areas tend to be poorer. And at the same time, it can take housing stock. So I think for us, we haven't had vacation rental policy other than to say that they're not allowed, but it might be good to start looking at a new framework, especially with these bonuses from the province. My last comment on business licenses. Our MLE texted me right away on the day that they released this, and she was like, see, we're getting electoral areas, what they've been asking for years in regards to business licensing authority. My understanding is this will extend beyond vacation rental. So I think when you come back, that could be an extra tool. For example, what if the shipbreaking operation had to have a business license and the rest of it? I think there's going to be a broader set of consideration as we look at a program around business licenses, and I'm supportive of that. I think that in comparison to the municipalities, we've lived in a really Wild West with very few tools for local government to both support but also enforce in problematic situations. So yeah, that's my comments for today. I see there's no recommendations, so that's good. We can just mull on it over Christmas and come back and discuss it further.
Director Green.
Well, knowing human nature, I think Director Arbor said it best when they tried to bring in TUPs. I hope the province recognizes that the public will not take kindly to this, nor will they willingly comply. As to the conspiracy theories of the overreaching government, they can't possibly employ enough compliance people to make it happen. And come election time, they may have to reverse some of their policies. So not to say that it isn't a good idea in theory, but human behavior is a very difficult thing to change. Especially the stuff running under the radar, that's cash money. Good luck. And when it comes to business licenses, be warned, you got to be careful what you ask for. I would make sure that just the concept alone be scrutinized and comparatives looked at and how that's worked out, because we talked about this years ago, and it was pretty well decided that business licenses are maybe not the best thing for electoral areas. So yeah, I mean, it's all great. Everybody likes to control everything that moves, but there's still people with rifles in their rifle rack.
Director Graves.
I'll take that back. I misspoke.
Say that again, Director Grief.
Thank you very much. I misspoke. I take it back. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I did have a question for you, Alana, in regards to obviously if we're moving forward and having business licenses required and allocated, there's an administrative cost associated with that. So are those things that we're considering in the budget moving forward in the next few months? Thanks.
Through Mr. Chair to the directors, a couple of things. I think, the province is mindful that this is a really hard space for local governments and for regional districts in the absence of business licenses to work within. So the enabling authority is, as Director Arbor highlighted, it's for this use or any other use that the local government sees as something they want to regulate. And also the bill gives local governments the authority to define a specific area. So for example, if you get your housing needs report in January, which you will, and it flags for you that this particular use is driving otherwise rental residential units into this market instead, you might decide, okay, we want to target this particular area, whether it's a node or a full electoral area. I think in terms of the cost of the administration, we haven't really contemplated that as a local government in this budget because we'll be looking for a direction from you as to what you'd like to do. I think we do reserve a healthy budget for legal because that's often where we end up on some of these, if once a use becomes a nuisance use, the reference that was made. So I think it might be about pivoting, but we'll talk about some of those issues for you. What it would take to set up the administrative authority, where it would apply, depending on your interests, and how we would roll that out. The other thing is because this is not, you are under no pressure around timing, whereas municipalities who have been identified as required or mandatory, they have a slightly different set of circumstances facing them.
Thanks for clearing that. Director Arbor.
Yeah, I think this just a bit of feedback on the May, like I have a hard time seeing us go crazy and ask everyone to register for temporary use permit and have all these applications. Like I think that's so maybe next report talk to us about options around how we go about it in 6 months versus slow walking it and taking the time to come up with the right answers at the end. I realize there'll be some pressure, but for me, there's just so many non-compliant situations that may ask us to revise our bylaws overall. And I think to rush them into a temporary use permit and then we change the bylaw, like I don't want it to be overly messy, and I want to get to a good result in due time. So what I'm thinking is maybe I don't know when we're planning to do strategic planning this year. Sometimes we did it earlier. Last year we did it quite late in May and June, but it feels like this and the next report would be perfect items to carve out and have staff prepare a comprehensive set of options for us to look at how to move into that space in a diligent way, rather than just what I think a lot of local government will do is just reactive way to the new provincial policies.
Any other comments in regards to the report? Questions? So we're still in receipt. So does anybody want to vote on receipt?
It only is.
No, there is one more comment.
Just briefly. So at one time, I think we were told that business licenses are all or nothing kind of a proposition. You can't just limit it to this one this one function or this one activity. So all of a sudden Joe's backhoe has to have a license. And is that true? Because that would be absolutely, untenable for the rural areas. So you can just limit it to the short-term rental. That's all you license.
Through Mr. Chair, to the directors, yeah, you can absolutely prescribe a single use, and that is not new. You don't have to pick up every commercial use under the existing framework for municipalities, or certainly under this one. So that is not true. Yeah.
Director.
Yeah, thanks. And since this is the topics I'd love to explore in the planning session too, is for me, I would tend to lean towards doing maybe short-term rentals and commercial industrial that are clearly commercial industrial, and maybe leave the home occupation loan. But that's the kind of discussion that we could have at that time to really have some data around it and implications.
Any other comments or questions? All right, so vote on receipt of the report. All in favor? Carried. If I could suggest, we do have Director Healing here to talk about a couple of agenda items later on. Just wonder if we could maybe bump up to items 12 and 13.
Variance, the agenda.
All in favor? 12 and 13, I believe. 12 and 13. So all in favor? Carried. Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And so welcome, Director Hillian. I think I'll let Derry in her opening remarks speak to the nature of this Electoral Area Services Committee being also a the steering committee for liquid waste management planning. Derry Monteith is our manager of liquid waste planning, and will be presenting this report for which Director Hillian's invited to the table. Derry, over to you.
So, sorry, Derry, before we jump in, we do need to make a motion on receipt report. So, all in favor? Thanks. Derry.
Perfect. Thank you, James, and through the chair. So the steering committee for the South's Liquid Waste Management Plan addendum is made up of the Electoral Area Services Committee with the addition of the chair of the Sewage Commission. And that is why Director Hillian is joining us today for these two agenda items. So I've got a brief presentation to introduce the addendum report, and then Vince is going to provide a synopsis of the septic program as well. So I just wanted to start with a review of how the LWMP addendum process fits into the overall Comox Valley Sewage Service LWMP. The purpose of the addendum is to include consideration of the South region and the Sewer Extension South project within the recently completed CVSS Stage 1 and 2 LWMP, given the expansion of the sewer service area in August 22 to include Royston, Union Bay, and Comox lands. These processes will then be combined for Stage 3, and the Sewer Extension South project will be further advanced in the Stage 3 plan, which will then be submitted to the Minister of Environment for approval. So the purpose of the report in front of you today is to present to the committee the draft Stage 1-2 LWMP addendum report and to seek the committee's support in moving forward with the next steps in public engagement. Since we last updated this committee on the addendum in May of this year, we have made significant progress on the project. This includes public open houses and a webinar in June, as well as the launch of the Engage Comox Valley project page. Engineering for the project components has been advanced to a preliminary design level with associated Class C estimates. The draft addendum report has now been prepared, and including summaries of the project design and cost estimates. And this draft report has been presented to our Public and Technical Advisory Committee at their joint November 2022 meeting. So a successful LWMP requires extensive public consultation, which has been a key part of planning for this project. The Royston Union Bay communities have been actively involved in wastewater planning for many years, and this involvement is carrying forward into this LWMP addendum process, with public consultation happening at all the critical steps in the process. This slide summarizes the public engagement results since project planning has commenced. This includes over 200 participants attending in-person open houses, with an additional 100 plus participants joining the webinars, significant traffic on the project webpage, and direct outreach through project newsletters. So one of the main updates in the preliminary collection system design included in the draft addendum report is changes to property connections and required statutory rights of way in neighborhoods proposed for servicing. The original conceptual design included a limited application of low-pressure sewer grinder pumps, where the wastewater plumbing exiting the homes was presumed to be lower than the gravity sewer main in the fronting street. The conceptual design also featured several areas where gravity sewer mains traversed private property and would therefore require statutory rights of way. WSP has now completed preliminary design for the collection systems, and this design is informed by a review of existing LiDAR data and other base mapping, as well as hydraulic modeling for the collection systems to ensure minimum flushing velocities and other requirements can be met. Given the schedule and cost risks associated with acquiring the number of SRWs that were proposed in the conceptual design, along with public concern expressed at the open houses regarding gravity sewer piping traversing private property, the preliminary design now keeps the collection system piping predominantly within the road right-of-way, and also includes with this a higher number of properties requiring an LPS grinder pump. So the table on the slide just shows the key differences between the previous conceptual design for the collection systems and the updated preliminary design, for the collection systems for Royston and Union Bay. So with these updates to the design, we have also received updated cost estimates for the project with, I'd say, little overall change in the overall project costs. We have updated project cost impacts for Phase 1A properties that have been calculated for the addendum report. And these property owner costs have decreased slightly from previous estimates, with an overall reduction in borrowing costs of approximately $200 per year, from an estimated $1,400 to $1,700 a year to $1,200 to $1,500 a year. And while the estimated overall project cost to those previously presented is relatively the same, the allocation of the additional $3.6 million in critical community infrastructure program funding that was previously being held in reserve, as well as the additional $1.25 million in community works funds allocated to the project has allowed for this reduction in property cost impacts. So the draft addendum report is quite a large report, as you've seen on the agenda. It is divided into 7 main sections. These include an introduction, which summarizes past planning work in the area and the scope for the addendum process. Consultation, which includes a summary of our PACTAC meetings to date, as well as a summary of First Nations and public consultation. Section which includes service area, land use, development, and population, which provides really the context upon which the servicing plans for the South were developed, including service area boundaries, population projections, and a summary of CBRD land use bylaws in the area. It also includes a section on regulations and guidelines, which includes brief discussion of guidelines for things like inflow and infiltration, wastewater volume reduction, and wastewater source control. And this section also includes a discussion of existing septic systems in the plan area and commitments to explore the development of a septic regulatory bylaw in the plan area. Project design, of course, is included, and this section includes sewer flow and organic load projections, proposed project phasing and catchment area selections, and the preliminary design for the project. And then we have completed a Phase 1 environmental impact study for the plan area, which is also included, as well as a cost impact section, which I just discussed, which includes a summary of the overall project costs for Phase 1A and 1B, as well as the updated property owner costs for Phase 1A. So next steps, we're presenting the report today to this committee and tomorrow to the Comox Valley Sewer Service Liquid Waste Management Planning Steering Committee, which is made up of the Comox Valley Sewerage Commission with the addition of the Electoral Area A Director. We are recommending moving forward with the next round of public open houses in January of 2024. And then following that, another round of committee meetings, starting with a PAC-TAC meeting potentially scheduled for March, April 2024. And then pending direction of the board, we'd be looking to submit the LWMP addendum report to the province in May of 2024. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Thanks. Chair Hillian, did you want to provide any comments in regards to the report, or are you comfortable with Gary's comments?
Thanks, Chair. No comment at this point. I will have a question or two as we move along, but thanks for the opportunity.
Director Albert.
Yeah, thanks. The project is going really well in terms of trying to meet our deadlines, and I really want to show appreciation for staff, but also especially for the Public Advisory and Technical Advisory Committee that have been at work on this. A lot of thoughtful input and advice and all that from volunteer community members. So it's been really nice. The last meeting was good. We do have I think from a process perspective, like the layout of the project is really going well in the consideration of all the different design aspects. But I think the aggregate tax increase report was accompanied at last meeting, and we started seeing some reaction from community members. There's also a letter to the editor in the record that I may answer this week that came out this weekend. I think the concerns from the community is likely to escalate a little bit. My view is this is a really good project, really well leveraged, but the burden on those who will participate in addition to other costs that are upcoming is really being felt. I believe, so I made a decision with myself this weekend. I think we should hunt for more money. I think we should, the federal government hasn't contributed to this project yet. I think another $3 million as a federal contribution that goes directly to support residents of Royston and Union Bay would start to bring this project into a more, a less difficult place from an aggregate perspective. When I say that, I think the ones here, maybe Dr. Hillian followed that up too, but for Royston, Union Bay, taxes could go almost in the doubling right now when you add the fire hall and the water. Union Bay could look at a $6,500 tax bill per average home. So that's more than the average homes in Courtenay, and that's without the services, infrastructure, boardwalks, not boardwalks, but sidewalks. So I'm definitely starting to hear from residents that concern that every project seems good, but because all these projects are coming at once, it's just going to be a lot of pressure on those households that participate. So, so I'll come back with that next couple of months, maybe talk with James and think about an approach to further alleviate the cost. I think when we started talking 3-4 years ago around this project, our hope was that it'd come in around, $1,250, $1,500 per household per year. And I think a $3-4 million additional resources to the project would bring us there. So not give up. Also not tell the community we're going to get it for sure, but I think we need to push on the accelerator in terms of the funding supports to the project. Otherwise, again, happy to hear comments from the rest of the group. I think the project itself is going really well.
Chair Healy.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate Director Arbor's comments, and you'll know from what I've stated previously at these meetings that I support this project 100%. As a longtime resident of the Valley, I'm aware of the ongoing concerns of septic systems into Bain Sound over many years, the impact on our environment and the shellfish industry and such. And so it's gratifying that we are moving ahead on this project, and the staff reports are clear, and the project is moving forward in a good way. But of course, the issue of the cost for the individuals in the area affected remains significant. And I was going to ask the question of staff if in fact we are in the process of continuing to seek out additional grant funding, if we have any optimism that we may be able to find that support, and how we might be able to, as a region, which will benefit immensely all across the Comox Valley, how we might better support the individuals who may be impacted by these significant increases.
James, do you want to speak to that?
Certainly, anytime we can find additional grant funding, we're more than interested in seeking that out, and recognize that any sort of grant opportunities will benefit this project overall. Derry, I don't know if you have any specific grant programs that we are looking at this time. Certainly, the project stands to benefit from the significant grant contribution identified earlier this year. But Derry, if there's any additional programs you're looking at?
Yeah, thank you, James. We did meet with municipal affairs staff last week to ask them about any additional programs that may be on the horizon, and it doesn't sound like there's much at this point, but Canada and BC are currently, I believe, negotiating a new Canada Community Building Fund agreement, and so we'll see what the outcome of that is in terms of potential new funding.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if we might also engage with the watershed steward groups in our community. We have a high number of groups and individuals who have a tremendous concern for the environment, who are active in promoting environmental protection, the health of our waters and our rivers and lakes. And it may be helpful to engage with those groups to explore the possibility that there are grants through foundations and other organizations that might be brought to the table. It may be a long shot, but I think it's worth exploring given the significance of the project and the challenges that it will present to the residents of the area. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Mark?
Thank you, through the CEO and through the chair. Speaking of grant funds, at tomorrow night's board meeting, there's a report on the Growing Communities Fund. And that report does consider an option for allocating some of the funds towards the South Sewer project. So there's a bit of an opportunity there.
Thanks. Any other comments? Director?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's obviously we were absolutely thrilled with the $30 million contribution from the province. We are hopeful that the Comox First Nation and Union Bay Estates partnership contributions are going to come through, even though those are not guaranteed at this stage. We're 4 years away from a build, so a lot can change as well. Inflation costs could go up, could go down. We don't know. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, but we seem to have a lot of leverage for the big pipe. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of contributions for the main lines, but not so much for the neighborhood builds. And I'm sure that KFN, if the project goes through, will be hunting for funding for their own build as well, and supports. So for me, that's where I think my attention will shift to in the next year or two. I think there's conversation, as Dr. Hillian said, with anybody in the Valley that's interested, conservation groups otherwise, but there's also others like the Department of Fisheries. We had a lot of contacts there. The federal government has not committed a cent to the project yet. And the Community Building Fund, that's core resources to electoral areas. So I realize we could use that opportunity if need be, but it sure would be nice to find an aligned partner, either through DFO or other contacts that see that value to the health of Bain Sound. So we can talk to them. I'll probably talk to Gord Johns about that, et cetera, et cetera. But again, for today, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to say the project is going well, and yes, I will support going to the public open houses in January. The more public input we get into the project, the better. Thank you.
If I could pipe in, I'm just wondering if it's appropriate or not for the representative of the Comox Valley Regional District that attends the Comox First Nation Treaty tables on a monthly basis, that they might have that ability to again put forward the message that Director Arbor has put forward in regards to trying to get some federal support assisting the Comox First Nation down the road. I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not. I'm just putting it out there. James, perhaps you could maybe comment.
We actually have the treaty representative at the table here, and Director Hillian. He's been appointed by the board for several years now to attend on the CVRD's behalf to the provincial treaty team. Of course, lots of those discussions are confidential and with the treaty process itself. So I don't know that we would have any input in that regard. And I mean, Director Hillian's got his light on, but Director Hillian certainly takes the feedback and context from the board table in his representation. So Director Hillian, if you've got more to add on that regard.
Chair Hillian.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, James. Chair Hardy, you will know from your previous time at that table that convincing the federal representatives of anything is a significant challenge. But it's certainly I certainly take your suggestion to heart, and will do what I can to bring it forward in a way that makes sense and get some type of a response. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on, and I get and understand, but I don't want to take us off on a tangent, but again, in regards to those costs for the residents of Area A down the road, Comox First Nation with potential treaty settlement lands down there. Again, there's a cost associated with that for the nation there as well. So I would think that, again, maybe there is some potential funding pockets out there from a federal perspective, looking at it from not just non-Indigenous communities living in and around the area, but there will definitely be some Indigenous communities down there as well. So that's why I kind of brought it up. And like I said, it doesn't hurt to throw a hook in the water. You never know. Thanks. So any other comments, questions in regards to item number 12? So vote on receipt report. All in favor? Carried. And there is a recommendation, so a motion. Thank you. Any discussion, comments in regards to the recommendation? Then can we vote on recommendation? All in favor? Carried. Moving to item number 13. Thank you. James?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Vince Van Tongeren, our environmental analyst, will provide a verbal update on this staff report on the septic deferral program. Vince.
Great. Thank you, James. To the chair and the CEO, to the directors. Purpose of this report is to provide some further context on the sewer deferral program that's proposed in the area. A common question heard from residents in Royston and Union Bay is whether properties with newer septic systems would be required to connect to the sewer when it reaches these communities. At the last steering committee meeting in May of this year, a recommendation to develop a septic deferral program to delay sewer connection and payment of sewer operating costs for up to 5 years was approved. So this report in front of you today provides further information on this proposal. Proposed eligibility for the program includes properties with type 2 or 3 systems less than 5 years old at the date of required sewer connection. According to the current project schedule, this would be sometime in the 2028 timeframe for properties in phase 1A of the project. Proposed eligible deferral costs would include sewer operating costs. These are currently estimated at approximately $600 per year, as well as any costs related to work on private property for decommissioning of an existing septic system and connecting the home to the sewer connection at the property line. Total deferral time is proposed to be 5 years or sooner than that if the property in question happens to be sold. Based on an analysis of Island Health septic system records in the area, it's estimated that approximately 5% of properties could be eligible for this type of program should it be offered. Should all eligible properties participate, there would be a slight increase in annual sewer operating costs for remaining connected properties. And the table in the report includes a little bit of further context on this. Should the recommendations in the report be approved, these program criteria would be included in upcoming public engagement on the project, and the program would be implemented through inclusion of program details within future sewer use bylaws for electoral area neighborhoods being serviced by the Sewer Extension South project. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Director Green?
More comment, just the last iteration of this South Sewer. That was one of the main sticking points, was the fact that there was no deferral for people with newer systems. And of course, the longer we take to actually get the system up and running, the more likely we are to have people put in newer septic systems. My question is it still ongoing? Are there people still putting in their own private systems, hoping that when it comes time to connect, they can still get that 5-year deferral? Are they kind of gaming it, or I just wondered what the how the public are taking this now? It's just obviously there's systems in place that are under 5 years old, so there's still people putting in systems relying on this deferral.
There are a few questions coming in about what the requirements would be for newer systems. I know at the last Public and Technical Advisory Committee meeting, when this topic was discussed, the Island Health representative there also indicated that they've been getting some queries about options for properties in phase 1A. And even as the project gets more imminent, the option for property owners to put in a holding tank has been brought up as well. So.
Chair Helium.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to express support and appreciation for this initiative. I think once again, we have many examples where citizens are doing what is the responsible thing at significant cost to themselves until we catch up and provide a solution that is all encompassing, and it makes sense to support those citizens to some extent and help them with those costs. Thank you.
Any other comments? So can we vote on receipt of report? All in favor? Carried. Any comments? Questions on the recommendation? Oh, can we move to vote on recommendation then, please? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Helium. And I think we're bouncing back to, is it 8 or 9? Now, it is lunchtime. Do we want to take a quick break and do a working lunch, or? Yeah, looks like all the food's there. So maybe take a 15-minute break to grab lunch and then do a working lunch if you like. Does that work? Or you want to keep moving forward? 10 minutes. Back at 12:11. Thanks. About 2 more minutes, folks. All right. I think we're coming back to item number 8. So we have somebody make a motion to receive the report. Item number 8, Housing Statutes Amendment of Information. Thank you. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Alana Malali, General Manager, Planning and Development Services, will be introducing the staff report again with a presentation. So Alana, when you are ready, over to you.
Thanks very much, James. Through Mr. Chair to the directors. So as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about Bill 35, I suggested that there were at least 4 statutes that would be of interest to us at this point in our electoral areas. So now I'm going to talk about the other 3. Bill 44, which is the Residential Development Amendment Act, Bill 46, which is Development Financing Amendment Act, and Bill 47, the Transit Oriented Areas Act. So key changes within each of these for electoral area planning pertain to housing related policy content of an official community plan, public hearings, development cost charges, and a new tool called amenity cost charge contributions. As I mentioned previously in respect to Bill 35, each of these bills is also sitting at first reading and is anticipated along with their implementing regulations to receive royal assent in January. I'm just going to take some time and go through each of the bills and what I think are the key highlights for us relative to planning in the electoral areas. So in respect to Bill 44, residential development amendments, the first key change is that all local governments must have at least one official community plan, and it must be updated to include housing policies that are based on the community's most recent housing needs report, including a 20-year housing supply projection. So good news, we already have a rural official community plan, and the update of our housing needs report is underway, including that calculation of a 20-year supply projection. And we'll be presenting those to you in January. The second key change to be aware of is that going forward, requiring a public hearing will be prohibited if the zoning amendment is for a residential development that is compliant with the official community plan and where the residential component of the proposed development constitutes at least 50% of the gross floor area of all of the buildings and structures that are included in the development. So this is a regulatory change that is mandatory. This will be a departure for the CVRD, although we have had the ability in the last couple of years to waive a public hearing. We haven't typically done so, except a few during our lockdown period. This change I want to flag, although it might feel concerning, this change does not preclude our ability to host a public information session on a development application. And I would suggest that that could provide for a much richer opportunity for community engagement and for the development proponent to hear feedback from our public. The third change I'd like to talk a little bit about is the introduction of small-scale multifamily density requirements. So this is that provision that was making headlines a couple of months ago in the fall, stating that every property would have, the opportunity to construct 6 units. Of course, we know that that is not the case, and certainly for the electoral areas, we are exempt from this provision. So we are exempt from the small-scale multifamily density provision for 2 reasons. One, because we don't have sewage servicing, as you know, and the second, because our zoning bylaw is premised on the lack of sewage servicing and has created a minimum parcel size for subdivision that is 0.4 hectares. So those are 2 explicit reasons in the bill that will garner municipalities or electoral areas an exemption from that provision. So this could change for us with the advent of sewer in the Union Bay settlement node, but that will play out in time. So for now, no change needs to happen on our end, and we are exempt from this provision. Moving forward to Bill 46, this is the Development Financing Act statute. This bill provides additional enabling tools to local governments to finance infrastructure and to fund some of the key amenities that are necessary for developing complete communities. This bill, I would suggest, endeavors to provide greater certainty to developers regarding development charges or development costs that they need to be considering when they're thinking about acquiring land and when they're building their pro formas around their development decision-making. 2 key initiatives within this bill pertain to development cost charges. The bill adds fire protection, police, highway, and solid waste and recycling facilities as eligible development cost charge categories. This change will give local governments the ability to impose development cost charges to contribute to the capital costs of providing this infrastructure. We're just in the process right now following up with the province to understand if the additional category highway development or highway facilities will include the opportunity for funding active transportation infrastructure. And we'll report back on that. We've also been working closely with the member municipalities on this and the other bills. And right now we're just trying to convene a meeting with our municipal colleagues to look at the DCC changes and how that may impact development overall in the community. Another change I'd like to highlight for you in this bill is the creation of an amenity cost charge framework. And this is a charge that can be imposed on anyone who comes forward for a subdivision application or a building permit application. And it's for the purpose of providing funds to assist the local government to pay the capital costs of providing or constructing or expanding amenities that are to the benefit, either direct or indirectly, to those involved in the development, the residents, for example, of the development, or the increased population of residents and workers in an area that will result from the development. So this bill names a few features that local governments might consider in respect to the amenity cost charge framework. Facilities such as community centers, recreational facilities, libraries, daycare facilities, essentially a facility or feature that provides for the social, cultural, heritage, recreational, or environmental amenities that a community can benefit from. The next change that I'd like to highlight in respect to this is, and I think this is a significant one, is that along with this amenity cost charge provision, it gives the ability of regional districts or municipalities for that matter, who provide a service in a different political jurisdiction, the ability to impose an amenity cost charge for development within that jurisdiction. As an example, we might consider that our recreation facilities could benefit from an amenity cost charge for development that happens in the city of Courtenay. And so under that framework, local governments would have the opportunity to impose the charge. It would be collected by the municipality and then remitted to the jurisdiction, the CVRD, that provides the service. Just as commentary, I would say that as staff, we are really welcoming the addition of amenity cost framework to the legislation. Presently, many local governments in BC, including the CVRD, negotiate voluntary community amenity contributions at the time of rezoning. And I'll say that this has been very challenging to implement in the electoral areas. This new enabling authority, I think, will give greater transparency to that amenity discussion, and it will provide certainty for prospective development proponents. They will know what is expected of them before they even make an application. This is enabling legislation. However, the idea is that this new tool will phase out that negotiated amenity. So that's something that we'll be moving away from and in favor of this tool. So staff would suggest to you that if we use this strategically, this could become an important funding tool, particularly for those amenities whose community values transcend those political boundaries. And we'll report back to you when more information is known, either through the regulations or upon royal assent of this bill, to talk about what the preparation of an amenity cost charge bylaw could look like, including a consultation plan with our industry. The third bill I'd like to flag for you is Bill 47, and that's transit-oriented areas. I think, this bill is really just about connecting the dots between where we attract density, where we want to attract density, and our transit services. The legislation does define transit-oriented areas as lands within a prescribed distance of an existing or planned bus stop, bus exchange, rail facility, or other transit facility. And the details on this will, as I say, be fleshed out in those regulations come January. It's not really clear yet how this will impact the electoral areas, and I think that the details will be known around the definitions of bus facility, for example. And so we'll report back to you. Certainly, I think the impacts are much more apparent in the municipal areas. So we'll continue to work with those municipal partners to understand how this regulation may, for example, impact our transit service and planning within our transit service. This report, like the last, is just provided to you for information at this time. We are going to be circulating this report as well as the short-term rental, report to our advisory planning commissions for their information. So hopefully this will help them feel more purposeful and understanding what the changes are and how they might change planning within the electoral areas. But I would just suggest to you that each of these bills really is about setting the enabling conditions for development of complete communities. And we'll just continue to work with our partners in the municipalities to understand how we can make the most of these enabling tools in order to achieve that for you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alana. Director Harper, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, thanks. A flurry of activity from the province on the housing front. It's good to see. Last week, just anecdotally, but I should also report to here on it. At FCM, we had the federal conservative housing critic come and speak to all of us that were in Ottawa for advocacy days. And he opened up his comments by saying, we have a serious problem in housing. And then he went, you are the problem. And he was pointing to all of us local government elected officials. So that made for a pretty raucous session and question period after. But what part of his remarks was interesting, he said there was only one jurisdiction he felt was heading in the right way, and he made sure to say that he was not an NDP person, obviously, but he said he liked what David Eby is doing in the province of BC in regards to the new set of policies coming out. So that was interesting coming out of federal conservative housing critic. So that recognition that BC is really trying to correct a lot of systemic problems we've had for many years on the housing front. In regards to specifically for Area A and the rural areas, yes, so happy to see that today and the start of a discussion. I think I'm glad that you pointed out with sewage there might be new considerations in the future. And I would also say, even with Union Bay Estates, I think it's no secret now. I've talked publicly about this, about the CD1 and CD4 on the west side of the highway. That CD1 is really for single residential units right now. And I think if we're learning everything from the cost of infrastructure and the rest of it, So we need to densify, and I think the developer is not in disagreement with that, but we will need to revise some of those historical agreements that we have and better understand what will be imposed by the province versus not. Just a question to Alana, when you said, we are exempt from some of the multi-density in the electoral areas, to what extent can we opt in? So that would be the question that I have, that if we do identify those areas where we want to put that kind of zoning, which I realize would be not aligned with our current regional growth strategy. If I think about Royston, for example, for me, it triggers a lot of questions because Royston, we talked earlier, we had a report on sewage. In our regional growth strategy, eventually Royston is supposed to be annexed into Courtenay or Cumberland. And so for me, it raises a lot of question with the kind of costs that they're going to see. I'm starting to wonder, well, actually, if they got annexed now, maybe the municipality would give them the same rates and still put in infrastructure. There's a lot of questions around density, around housing opportunities. I think that these new regulations, which are intended to upset the apple cart in a good way, but I think that I'll have a lot of topics, I think, and I'll try to work on a list of questions maybe for staff over the next couple months so I can better understand the opportunities and risks with these new policies in the areas. But today was a great overview, I think, of the different legislation that are coming down.
Not seeing any other comments in regards to the report. Do we want to vote on receipt of report? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Lana. Moving to item number 9. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Amanda Yazinski, Senior Manager of Building and Bylaw Services, will be presenting this update and looks like might be joined by John Crockford, Manager of Building Services. So Amanda, over to you.
Good afternoon, through the CEO to the chair. So I'm going to introduce the report this morning or this afternoon now. And John Crockford, our manager of building inspection, is going to go over the update in the report for us. So this report is a building services project update to provide an update on the work that's been done to date to streamline our development approvals process and improve communications with development applicants, homeowners, and the development industry. In addition, this report introduces a new idea and proposal to incentivize and assist property owners to build secondary residential units, for example, carriage houses. I'll let John run through the report and the updates and on the project and specific.
Through the CAO to the chair, I'm excited to present this report. I can say that the building department's in a good place. The meet and greet event mid-November went really well. We had lots of good feedback. I was able to talk to folks who are in early stages of their project and advise on their next steps. We even had a set of plans rolled out on the table at one point. We finally have a full complement of staff. We've hired 2 new staff members and staff have returned from leave. One is a permanent full-time position and the other is a 1-year term. Both have experience and were hired as building officials in training and have become members of the Building Official Association and have already become certified level 1 inspectors. They've been trained and continue to be mentored to gain the required knowledge and experience to do the job efficiently. Internal procedures and policies have been refined and created to provide more transparency and improve the process. Not taking in incomplete applications has helped immensely. Not taking in building permit applications until planning approvals are in place.
Pre-application meetings in collaboration with planning staff have been helpful for property owners and contractors to provide a full picture of the process and steps along the way. Currently, processing time for building permits is sitting around seven weeks, and demo permits and smaller scale projects are taking around 2 weeks. So that's a significant difference from this time last year. The report introduces the idea of a secondary residential unit housing design competition. The goal of the housing design competition is to make it easier and more affordable for the average homeowner to build a secondary dwelling on their property. It will help alleviate the housing crisis supply by increasing supply of additional housing units within the region. Staff anticipate that the most probable users of the pre-reviewed designs are individuals who would otherwise design their own secondary house or seek to purchase stock plans online. Often homeowners and builders can feel overwhelmed with the process of applying for a building permit, that the pre-approved plans will help alleviate this. It'll benefit a lot of property owners who are looking for a way to provide housing for either a family member or further develop their property. Examples could be a single story 90 square meter unit or a carriage house style with accessory space on the first floor. The benefits of the pre-approved plans would be a quicker application review process, easy access to high quality designs, code compliant plans, energy efficient. We could offer adaptable and accessible options, and we could lead to lower construction and homeowner costs, reduction in staff time, and more affordable units. And then what's coming in building? In the new year, we'll have a new building bylaw, a report on zero carbon step code, and the province is going to issue a new BC building code that the province will have education on in the new year. Thanks.
Any comments? Director Harbour?
Yeah, thanks for the positive update, and it's great to see, a very different place than last year, and great congratulations to the new staff that are joining us, and to the recruiters. It's a tough market to recruit in, so great to see that we are fully operational, and I like the pre-approved plans, but I would add a second layer to that. So I've become a converted, sadly. So, this is not the last thing you hear from me on this, but I think that building permits and planning are going to be one of the first sectors to be deeply affected by AI, by artificial intelligence, and the ability to input buildings and otherwise, and right away in 3 seconds find out. So I know Kelowna has started in that direction. Other jurisdictions, I think it's going to evolve in a very fast manner. And so I don't have a request, but other than to monitor and think about what that could mean for us, because I think a pre-approved plan is one thing, but I think we're 4 or 5 years out where people will be able to submit a custom design, which we see a lot of custom stuff in the areas because people like to build. We've heard that from staff before. It's like their one build in their life. And then it could crank out right away some feedback on whether it's meeting our requirements. Over time, you'll be able to put council priorities in there, and so I was at a conference where this was heavily discussed, and I think it's not going to go away, and it's going to be potentially a great tool and challenge us in how we work and avoid the kind of situations like we saw last year where we had a hot real estate market and then all of us fall behind. So but otherwise, really excited to see the zero step code as well coming up in the report. And thank you for the update.
Director Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may related more to Alana's presentation previous, but we see a lot of situations, especially in families now, where the kids can't afford to make it on their own anymore. That dual income families are struggling to be able to afford even a strata, let alone a standalone single family home. And I know that, you know, we're limited by the fact that we don't have servicing in the electoral areas. But the servicing we're talking about is basically controlled by the province, correct? Because it's Highland Health and regarding septic systems and the province regarding wells. But my question is, you know, rather than look at it like people are trying to, you know, look at this as some kind of an opportunity to increase their income, which some are. But when it comes to situations that I see in my area, I have a couple of properties right within a block where the scenario is that the daughter comes home, grandkids in tow, and they get a secondary dwelling for her to live in. And then lo and behold, a couple years later, that the other daughter comes home, grandkids in tow, and they say, well, why can't we build a secondary dwelling as well? Well, you know, especially if they've, you know, got something. I know we have that OPC in the business of the 5 hectare, 4 hectare minimum, and but really, it's not limited by some arbitrary number. It's limited by the ability of that lot to sustain another unit. So my question is there any levers that we have that we could use to increase density beyond, especially in the larger lots? And we're talking some lots are quite large, like, you know, that are 8-10 acres, to include yet another secondary dwelling if the soil conditions and the water supply and all that stuff is available for that build. Because my question is basically beating around the bush here, but getting to the point would be that is there any way we can specify that be a family member or something along those lines, so we could accommodate these people? Because there is some room there, I think, to not to go crazy on density, but, you know, to allow on humanitarian terms, even the ability for people to move home without having to, you know, move in the house.
Through Mr. Chair to the directors, I think there are a couple of pieces there. So one, I guess it's a little bit of a philosophical discussion about what the rural areas, what their role is in addressing some of these family needs. The question about, I'll just jump to your last question, which was, could we specify it's only for family? No, you can't. We can't regulate people, but you know, the example that you're speaking of, Director Grieve, earlier, you know, those folks took it, you know, had that dilemma, right? Multiple children, how do they do? And at the time, their response was to pursue subdivision for a family, subdivision for a relative. And so they did that, and they were successful in their pursuit to subdivide that lot in order to provide that other accommodation for the family member. I think in that instance, what we had been saying to you at the time, and what we would continue to say to you until we have a bigger conversation, is that there's a restriction in their zoning on the number of units on their parcel. So folks who have done that subdivision, the residence for a relative, we've suggested to you that there's, you know, we can be consistent with the regional growth strategy if you limit additional density. So I think, you know, it could be a conversation that you initiate now in the context of what does managed growth look like in the rural areas. I would suggest, though, that living in the rural areas is more expensive. You know, and if we're talking about truly affordable housing is provided where people, you know, have an option not to have a car. When we put more development in car dependent areas, we know that that's a cost that we're burdening that household with. And transportation is that second highest cost in most households. So I think, you know, it's an important discussion to have. What does rural affordability look like? It looks different in the municipalities for sure. I think the project that John is talking about today, that's an effort to help out with some of those conversations that are happening in households about how do they bring on another unit within the context of the existing framework. And that's about us trying to find ways within that existing policy framework to help out in this sphere of affordability.
Director Green. Thanks. Pardon me. Yeah, that's one of the neighbors, but there's others, and I'm just wondering if, and I said this earlier on, that maybe a lot of the policies we have were developed in an entirely different era. We are in a critical housing shortage right now. It's almost like a war footing. We've got people living in RVs, people living in barns, outbuildings, and we're told to turn a blind eye to it. I'm trying to find some way of legitimizing what is happening, because obviously you're going to look after your family. That's what's going to happen, regardless of what philosophical cant we have here at the board at any particular era. But, you know, sure, transportation is a cost, but, you know, a lot of these people carpool their kids, you know, to and from events, and that they join up in the neighborhood. So, I mean, it can be overcome without having to actually have a transit system. But I think the most important thing to remember here is it's a situation that already exists. We're looking for some way to legitimize it, some way to bring it in, you know, from the cold. And if we don't, if we go and say, oh, no, we said back in 2011, this is the way it's going to be, and, you know, that doesn't hold the water anymore. It doesn't. And we have some serious issues out there that we have to find some practical ways of dealing with. So if we just say, okay, it's going to be non-conforming people, we just turn a blind eye and let it just be the way it is. I mean, you know about some of the situations where we have countless RVs on one piece of property, you know, it's almost like a trailer park. So how do we get there without going back to the knee jerk of that, oh, this is the way it was set out back in 2011, because it's not 2011.
Through Mr. Chair to the directors, I think you're absolutely right. Context is changing, and so those are the you know, the kinds of conversations that we'll have with you in these coming months when we think about how do we implement some of these regulations and respond to the needs of our public. We will be coming back to you early in the new year with a report around recreational vehicles and maybe some of that updated context that you might want to consider, knowing that that is what many people are doing.
Just one more for me, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think it's time that we shed our preconceptions a lot, and you know, talk about zero step codes and stuff like that. That doesn't mean a hill of beans to the guy that's sleeping in a tent out here, you know. So it's either or. We had a discussion about the temporary farm workers, and they're all going to be getting these places to live. Well, we can't even do that for our own people. I mean, it'd be great to build everything zero step code and everybody has this, that, and the other thing. But, you know, all it's needed is the equivalent of a plywood shack with some insulation in the walls, and you know, something as basic as that is immensely greater than what some of the unhoused are dealing with. So, you know, I know it's not a problem to be solved at our level, but I think that we should try to keep our eyes open for creative ways in the rural areas to accommodate, and again, especially family, because more and more you're seeing the families. I mean, a lot of pressure on couples to stay together, but it doesn't always work. And what are you going to do? You know, you have to look after your own.
James?
Thanks. I think I would reflect on is Alana's comments earlier about coming back to the Electoral Area Services Committee with when the regulations are submitted and when we've got more clarity on what the housing legislative changes would be, and recognizing the rural context, the electoral areas in the rural context, whether that is around the servicing or the framework that we have to operate under. And so I heard Alana say that we will be coming back and we will be looking at it through that rural lens. which is different than a municipal lend. So really having that awareness and understanding what that rural contribution is to the current situation with respect to housing and affordability.
Thanks, James. Director Reeve, thanks for bringing those points forward. I know the last couple of community forums that we've held here in the boardroom, I've had families approach me and ask those same questions as well. So I think it is an important item that we need to have a serious conversation about moving forward. And I look forward to Lena's report that I think will help start that process and having a more fulsome discussion engagement in regards to how we move forward on that process moving forward. Thanks. Not seen any further comments. Can we vote on receipt of report? All in favor? Carried. Can I get somebody to make a motion to receive the recommendation? All in favor? Any comments, questions? Sorry, before we say all in favor. All in favor? Carried.
Receipt, rural fire, service.
Here we go.
Good to see you, Chief.
Green show.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Pleased to introduce Bruce Green. We'll be introducing the staff report on the Rural Cumberland Fire Protection Service and the Bates-Huban Fire Protection Service to follow. Bruce is our regional rural fire chief. So Bruce, over to you.
Thanks, CEO. Through the CEO to the chair and the committee. The rural Cumberland Fire Protection Area is serviced by a contract that we have with the Village of Cumberland to protect the houses. That contract is expiring at the end of this month. We are looking to extend that for 1 year, and that's a dual purpose. The village has had a fire service review as us, and they're going through that review and looking at the interface of that. And we're looking at our fire service review to see if there's different opportunities for us to deliver that service in a different way or do that. So we're looking for a 1 year extension to this contract so we can take a deeper dive. With that, I open to any questions. Director.
Yeah, thanks. That was my main question is why 1 year? And if we do 1 year, I think clause 5A can be eliminated. Under renewal and cancellation, it says this agreement may be terminated by either party provided a notice of 12 months. So we would have to provide notice today. So I think that's redundant, but I would, because we don't get these contracts very often on the table, I have talked in the past about looking at the servicing in the Royston area. So are you able to tell us a little bit more of staff's thoughts as to what a review could look like? Because otherwise, if we're not going to have transformative change, I would favor a 5-year agreement to bring that security to the service.
So two things. Cumberland is asking for the 1 year extension. They're the ones providing the agreement. But for us, I'm sure you're aware we are developing a new fire hall down Union Bay. And with that, there could be an opportunity to expand some boundaries. We have to do the research to see where those boundaries are and ensure that if we change boundaries that the fire underwriters insurance rates are going to apply all the way through there, because we don't want to make a decision and then have a negative impact coming down. So we want to make sure we do our research to ensure that it's not going to have a negative effect on the residents.
Absolutely. Last year, I think I took my ruler out on Google Map and measured the distance to downtown Royston from the Courtney Fire Hall and from the new Union Bay location. In regards to rural Royston, I think it's going to be a little bit problematic, which is why I find it interesting that even the rural Cumberland, well, the rural Royston to me area may be reviewed as well. So that's fine. So I guess we'll get a report on that mid-year or something like that by the summer. Yes. That would be great because then we can make contract renewal a longer term determination. Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions or comments. Do we want to vote on receipt or report? All in favor? Carried.
Move recommendation.
Second. Any comments, questions in the recommendation? Go ahead, Director.
Are you gonna keep the clause or do you want me to amend to just remove that net 5A?
It's up to you. I would just remove 5A.
Okay. You'll amend it, okay.
So vote on recommendation, all in favor? Carried. Item number 11. Chief?
Through the CAO to the chair and the directors, this one is the Bates Band Fire Protection Area. It's the same idea. We have a contract with the town of Comox to provide fire protection in that area. Comox isn't requesting any one-year term, so we can have a opportunity to do that. So at the same time, the fire service review is as looking at that. We've looked at possibly including that with the Merville Fire Protection Area, but we have to figure out the tax rates and if there's going to be the same thing implication. So with the rural government, we're going to be doing our research to figure out if there's a better way, more economical way that we can provide that service. The town of Comox and both Cumberland are providing excellent service at this time, so we don't want to change that. We want to keep providing the high level of service, but we have to do our research to find out where that's going to be. So for Beach Band, we're requesting a 3-year extension on the current agreement.
Any comments, questions? Not seeing any. Vote on receipt of the report from chief. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any comments, questions with regards to the recommendation?
Mr. Chair. I think I would just suggest that the date be December 31st, 2026. That would give us 3 years of extension. To the end of 27 would be 4 years. So I think it's 3 years you're intending there, Bruce? Okay.
So that would be amended then as well? Great. Thanks for the comments. So vote on recommendation. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Chief. We've done 12 and 13. Going to 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chris LaRose, our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, will be introducing this report. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, James, and through the chair, good afternoon, everyone. Over the past few weeks, we, following up on the action items coming out of the last rate review report to the previous EASC, we've met with, we've had an open house in each of the 3 water local service areas. So in advance of that, a letter went out to each property. We planned for a letter to go out to every property, but as it turns out, there was a gap. We developed a list that was based on those paying user rates, and neglected to send letters out of invitation to these events to the properties who are not connected but paying a parcel tax. So we're taking steps to correct that. So we have, or we assume we'll send a letter out to each of those properties, inviting them to a webinar where we'll repeat the information and provide an opportunity for them to ask questions and to be answered. And as a result, or kind of through that process, we've become aware of some concerns from some of these property owners who are not connected but paying parcel tax, and looking at the projected increases and concerned about that. So we've heard those concerns. We've given them close consideration on our end, and we plan to stay the course. But we've provided a brief summary in this report of those concerns and why we think the proposed approach of focusing the parcel tax for the bulk of the increase in revenue is defensible. And really, it comes down to the benefit that is received by these properties, even those properties that are not connected, in being from a fire protection perspective. So pipes, reservoirs are sized to deliver fire flow. That is the largest flow event, short of a leak, that this infrastructure will experience. So these properties benefit from the proximity of those hydrants and should pay a share towards that infrastructure. And then second of all, they receive a benefit from the ability to connect, whether it be themselves or subsequent owners. Will always have that ability to connect to a main in front of their property. And there's an inherent value to that. Yes, that's all I had to say this afternoon, but I'm happy to answer questions or speak to the report.
Director Creed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to comment that we had very similar oversight this morning at the Black Creek Oyster Bay water system and much the same solution. So it was just a small oversight in the fact that not all the property owners were included in the reach out. So yeah, so I think it's fairly easy to support this. Thank you.
Not seeing any other comments. Want to vote on receive report? All in favor? Carried. Someone like to make a motion to receive the recommendation?
I think there was none.
Oh, there isn't.
Just for.
Oh, sorry, it was just receipt. All right, I'll quiet down then over here.
I think we're in the camera now.
Yeah.
Actually, Mr. Chair, before you go there was some consideration of a new business item from Director Grieve with respect
Thanks,
to,
James.
I believe, referring to staff, the idea that staff come back with a resolution that could go to the AVICC to advocate for changes to Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure policy that could support rainwater solutions within right-of-ways.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Wow, that was some help from staff too. So
All in favor?
and we would endeavor to get a report back to you in January. I believe the deadline for AVICC is early February.
Director Green?
I'm just saying, I'm sure we'll get lots of traction with other jurisdictions on this one. But it is time for the province to put on the big boy pants and help us out, because we just don't have the tools to make it happen. And it's getting more and more critical every year with stormwater, rainwater management. So we need to come up with some new tools and new partnerships. And if I think nobody's better than UBCM to on their advocacy days to bring these forward to the ministries. It works really well.
Thanks. So again, I think Director Arred made a motion to move in camera. Second, thanks.